You probably saw the headlines. Sometime in early 2025, the entire marketing internet gathered to sit Shiva for the HubSpot blog. The numbers were brutal. SEM Rush data showed HubSpot's organic traffic dropped from about 13.5 million monthly visits to 8.6 million at the end of 2024, with the blog absorbing most of the damage. By mid 2025, third-party analyses estimated the blog's year-over-year reach declined at 75 to 81%. Whew. The company that wrote the inbound marketing playbook, the company that taught an entire generation of us that content brings customers, was watching AI overviews and ChatGPT eat its traffic in public. And the takes, of course, wrote themselves. If it can happen to HubSpot, it can happen to anyone. Content marketing is dead. Owned media is dead. Pack it up, everyone. The robots won. But then, dun, 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 HubSpot reported its full year results. $13.13 billion in revenue, up 19%, with 288,706 customers, 16% more than the year before. The conversation we should have been having was not whether HubSpot was dying. It's why it didn't die and what that tells you about the difference between owned media as a traffic engine and owned media as the moat. That is what we'll focus this month's PESO Model Diagnostic on. Once a month, I run a high visibility, award-winning brand through the PESO operating system lens. Not to dunk on great work, not to Monday morning quarterback, but to show you the gap between what looks finished and what actually compounds. Episode 1 was Budweiser, where the biggest paid moment of the year, a Super Bowl ad, still didn't add up to a system. Episode 2 was Liquid Death, which is the rare brand whose operating system is the product. Episode 3 was Peppa Pig, a perfect campaign that still wasn't quite a system, not because it wasn't brilliant. It was, but because it didn't extend beyond 9 months. Episode 4 is different again. This is the first one where the brand took a direct hit, the exact hit that every single one of us is terrified of. And we get to examine what the blast did and did not destroy. After 3 consumer brands, it's also time for a B2B subject, because if you've been following along with the CMO influencer crisis and last week's visibility engineering playbook, HubSpot is the living case study of everything we've been talking about. On this week's FinSucks podcast episode, I will give you all of the glory details.
If you're a communications pro who works hard, doesn't compromise quality, and gets the job done, welcome home. We'll share our tips, tricks, and stories, and together we will change the face of PR. Spin sucks, but we don't. With the Spin Sucks podcast, here's Gini Dietrich.
Welcome back to the Spin Sucks podcast. I'm Gini Dietrich. Before we get started, I have a little tidbit for you. Did you know that if you can't finish watching right now, you can subscribe to the audio version of the show? We're on all the platforms where you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter at spinsucks.com, and I personally will send it to your inbox every Tuesday morning. I want to inventory the entire HubSpot system because the blog is the only part anyone talks about. And it might actually be the least interesting part. Be still, my content marketing heart. Let's start with their content library, which is their most famous piece. For the better part of 2 decades, HubSpot has published its way into being the default answer to every marketing question on the internet. How to write a news release, even though they're not PR pros. What is a KPI? Blog post templates, email subject line formulas, the works. At its peak, the engine pulled in more than 13 million organic visitors a month, traffic most media companies would kill for, but attached to a software company. But look what it got built around it. They have the HubSpot Academy, which has certified more than 200,000 professionals, people who put HubSpot credentials on their LinkedIn profiles and resumes, which means HubSpot's owned education became other people's professional identity. Sit with that for 1 second. Your owned media on their resume is what we're doing too, with the PESO model certification. Inbound, the annual conference drew more than 11,250 attendees to San Francisco in 2025 and was named one of BizBasin's most innovative meetings, an owned media event so established it functions as an industry institution. It's actually being rebranded Unbound for 2026, and they're heading back to Boston because, of course, a company this comfortable with reinvention would rename and reverse engineer its own crown jewel. The annual State of Marketing report and a steady stream of proprietary research give journalists, consultants, and conference speakers, including some of us, data to cite all year long. HubSpot acquired The Hustle to add a media company's newsletter audience to the portfolio. The Marketing Against the Grain podcast puts its CMO and SVP of marketing in your ears every week. And at Inbound 2025, the company introduced Loop Marketing, its post-funnel playbook for a world where AI sits between your brand and your buyer. That is not a blog. That is an owned media economy. But before we get to the diagnosis, let's appreciate all of the many things they do spectacularly well, things that most brands never even attempt. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to bring a visitor up who is soaking wet because she's been playing in the sprinklers. All right. Hey, hi. Okay. They have built owned media that the business runs on, not alongside. The Academy doesn't just educate, it certifies people who then advocate for buying HubSpot inside their companies. So smart. The research doesn't just inform, it earns citations that build authority, lowering acquisition costs. And we're going to get back to that in a minute. Content isn't a department at HubSpot, it's their infrastructure. And they started the pivot before the AI crisis. Kip Bodnar, who is HubSpot's CMO, says the company began shifting from information to influence back in 2020. So they saw this coming 6 years ago. They started moving investment into YouTube, podcast creators, and the Academy years before AI search made what is a KPI content worthless. You can quibble with how complete that pivot was. I will in a minute. But the direction was right, and they were early. They were so early to the game. They can also draw the line from content to revenue. When the traffic collapsed almost in half, Bodnar's response was essentially that traffic was never the metric they ran the business on, which is exactly the right response. That is either spin, I don't think it is, or it's the single most enviable sentence a CMO can say, and the earnings reports suggest it's not spin. When your measurement connects content to pipeline, a vanity metric, impressions, click-through rates, open rates, all of those things can die without taking your credibility with it. This is the measurement problem that we all have solved in the wild. They metabolize the crisis into product. By April of 2026, HubSpot had launched AEO tools, software that tracks how brands show up in AI answers, plus a free AEO grader and a state of AEO research report. They took the punch, they studied it, and they started selling the defense. And here's where the diagnostic gets interesting. Unlike Budweiser, the integration here is real. And unlike Peppa Pig, there's no finale. They have an always-on system, which is what we're trying to achieve. So this diagnostic question is sharper. When the worst-case scenario actually happened, which parts of the operating system held? We're going to go through each of them. Owned media. Here's the part of the story that almost nobody told. The traffic AI took wasn't random. It was concentrated in the content furthest from HubSpot's actual expertise. The snarky comment I made about news release formats, not their expertise. A communications professional's expertise, for sure, but not HubSpot. That, famous quote roundups, registration letter templates, shorthand abbreviation explainers, search volume plays. Content HubSpot created because it would rank, not because it had any particular right to be the authority. That is the content AI overviews can now answer directly. And so, of course, that traffic evaporated. The content that they have that's built on real expertise, the marketing, the sales, the CRM material HubSpot has 2 decades of credibility behind, is what held. AI didn't kill HubSpot's owned media. It repossessed the borrowed parts, the things that they're not really experts in, that AI can answer without an expert. There's a lesson in that for every single one of us. There's a lesson in that for every content program that has ever chased volume. Authority you rent will always get taken back. Earned media. So HubSpot's earned media engine, I told you I was going to come back to this in a minute, barely resembles a media relations program. It is a citation machine. The research reports earn coverage. The data earns podium mentions in other people's keynotes. And now the machines have joined the media list. One study of more than 17,000 AI engine citations found HubSpot was the most cited vendor blog in its category, sharing the leaderboard with Wikipedia and Reddit. In the AI era, earned media includes being the source that answer engines trust. HubSpot got there the old-fashioned way, by publishing things worth citing, and they did it long before AI existed. Then they have shared media through the Academy alumni base, which is their audience, their podcast listeners, the 11,000 people who get on an airplane to fly to a conference every year. This is shared media as community, not as a posting calendar. Notice the difference between Peppa Pig's 61 million TikTok views and this. That was sharing about an event. HubSpot's shared layer is pinned to ongoing relationships, which is why it didn't blink when the website traffic fell. And then paid media is their quietest layer and most is deliberately so. Paid at HubSpot amplifies proof. So it amplifies research tools, the academy, rather than buying awareness. When 95% of what AI engines cite comes from non-paid sources, a paid-heavy strategy can't save you anyway. Paid media's job in this system is to accelerate what other channels have already validated. Then you have integration. Their flywheel is real and you can trace it. It works like this. Research earns citations. Citations build authority. Authority makes the academy credible. The academy certifies evangelists. Evangelists fill inbound. Inbound generates a year of content and product news, which feeds the research. It's a flywheel. It moves and moves and moves. Every channel feeds the others. That's exactly what you want because an operating system feeds itself while you sleep. And this is what it looks like at scale. And last but certainly not least, my second favorite measurement, owned media is my favorite if you didn't get that. HubSpot could lose its most famous marketing assets headline metric and calmly point to customer growth because the measurement spine connects content to business outcomes. Compare that to the Lippincott data we looked at 2 weeks ago, where only 28% of CMOs feel they have real organizational influence, largely because they cannot draw that line. Bodner, HubSpot CMO, can. That is the whole ballgame. All right, so let's assume that HubSpot sits at the top of the PESO model maturity level, which is stage 5 or leadership. It means their operating system is their competitive advantage. They are absolutely crushing it. And I have 3 honest observations from my PESO lens about where they could improve. First, the blog traffic bloat was a choice. Having all of that extra traffic was a choice. Them being able to say, we never cared about vanity metrics is a great line. But you don't accumulate millions of visitors of famous quotes traffic by accident. Somebody did chase that volume for years because it worked. The generous read is that every mature system accumulates barnacles during the good times. I certainly have them. Lots of organizations have them. And the real test is how fast you scrape them off when the environment changes. HubSpot passed that test. But the cleaner lesson for your team is not to build barnacles in the first place. If a piece of content ranks but doesn't reinforce your actual authority, it's not an asset. It's not going to help you. It's exposure. It's risk. Maybe not right now, but it will be eventually. Single platform dependence had to be heard before it got fixed. For all the pivot started in 2020 framing, HubSpot was still carrying 13.5 million monthly Google-dependent visits into late 2024. The diversification was real but partial, and the correction, when it came all at once. If your owned media strategy has one distribution channel doing most of the work here, Google and then maybe LinkedIn or one newsletter platform for you now, you have the exact same exposure. And I know that every single one of us has been reliant on Google traffic for years. So we have to figure that out. The time to diversify is while the incumbent channel still works. Google does still work, but it's being less effective. The Moat is expensive, and that's the point. 2 decades, an acquired media company, a certification academy, and an annual conference. You cannot replicate that by Friday, no matter how much you would like to. Same, me too. But the architecture scales down to each of us. We don't all have to be that big for it to work. You can do it if you have one genuinely authoritative content hub instead of 10 volume plays, one owned community touchpoint, and one piece of research your industry has to cite. So here are some questions to ask yourself. Number 1, if your traffic disappeared tomorrow, what would still be true? HubSpot lost their traffic and kept their authority, their community, the certifications, and the citations. Run the thought experiment on your own program. Strip away every visit and inventory what remains. If the answer is not much, you've been building a traffic engine, not a moat. And now you know exactly what you need to do in the next 12 months, which by the way, is something we help people and organizations do either through the PESO Model certification, which is self-serving, you can do yourself, or via our white glove service. Number 2, are you creating content you have the right to own? The famous quotes graveyard is the most instructive example of content failure in the AI era. Before your next piece, before you even put pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, ask whether you're the credible authority on it or just an available answer. AI keeps the authorities and it replaces the availables. If you aren't ready to hire us, last week's Visibility Engineering Playbook walks you through exactly how you can build the kind of organization that the machines do cite. And number 3, when the machines answer for your category, are you the citation? Traffic is a human metric. Citation is the machine era one. HubSpot restructured its content and increased its AI citations by 642%, which tells you this is engineerable. It's not luck, it's visibility engineering. Somebody will be the source that AI engines trust for your category's questions. The only question is whether it's you or your competition. So the 3 questions are, if your traffic disappeared tomorrow, what would still be true? Are you creating content that you have the right to own? And when the machines answer for your category, are you the citation? HubSpot took the hit every CEO has nightmares about, and the business grew 19% anyway. Not because it was lucky, but because the system was never about the traffic. If you would like to learn more about how to embed the PESO model operating system inside your organization, join us in the SpinSucks community. It's a great place to get advice, brainstorm ideas, and build real relationships with your peers. You can find us at spinsucks.com/community. That's spinsucks.com/community. And make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. We're posting tips, how-tos, cheat sheets, and more every week. I'll see you next week. Bye.